I'm Keith Olbermann, and this is The Resistance. Trump is panicking about Russia. It is often hard to be sure what you are actually seeing when you look at him. There is so much going on, so little of it makes sense to ordinary sane eyes. But this is obviously panic. And the reasons he is panicking may include a man named Mikhail Kalugin, and also a growing understanding that the key to Trump's fatal Russian scandal is less about fake news and more about hacking the voter registration rolls in about 20 different states before the election. First, the panic. Twitter, bright and early in the morning, turning to his private intelligence service, Fox and Friends. He cannot stop bringing up spying. He cannot stop bringing up Russia, but now unable to find anything else to deflect whatever his people did, he has to invoke Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman's brother's company's legal lobbying for a bank for $28,000 a month. And then panicking defined. Did Hillary Clinton ever apologize for receiving the answers to the debate? Just asking. You wouldn't get the answers to a debate. You would get the questions. There are times when Donald Trump must make no sense even to Donald Trump. And in two other tweets less than 21 hours apart over the weekend, he contradicted himself, first applauding news reporting based on government leaks to anonymous sources, then condemning news reporting based on government leaks to anonymous sources. But the panic was not limited to Twitter. Common sense would dictate Trump should never mention any of the following things ever again: surveillance, wiretapping, intel, leaking, Russia, or say outside things changing the course of a presidential race. Trump, Sunday, talking to the Financial Times about the French presidential race. Question: in France, Marine Le Pen has a very similar message to you, not identical. Do you think a victory for her would validate what you have done here? Don't answer it, don't answer it, don't answer it. Don't hint about Russian interference, don't hint about Russian interference, don't hint about Russian interference. I don't know what is going to happen. I know that some outside distractions have taken place, which have changed that race. You know, some outside things have happened that maybe will change the course of that race. What's the French word for panic? Trump is not panicking solo either. The Devin Nunes story, a profile in panic, if ever there was one, is now well documented that the supposedly exculpatory surveillance intel Nunes rushed to the White House to loudly share with Trump was reportedly shared with him the night before at the White House by 2 or 3 White House officials. And you may have seen a couple of Sean Spicer's Baghdad Bob news conferences recently in which he twisted himself into such knots that, as the former Justice Department spokesman Matthew Miller put it, according to Spicer, Hillary Clinton has such close connections to Russia that they intervened in the election to elect her opponent. That's panic from Trump, from his White House, from his pet congressman. But because of somebody named Mikhail Kalugin, head of the economics section at the Russian embassy in Washington, Kalugin reportedly went home to Russia last August after a 6-year stint in this country. Last week, the impeccable BBC reporter Paul Wood reported that U.S. officials have confirmed Kalugin was in fact, quote, a member of one of Russia's spying organizations, the SVR or GRU. And so what? There are a lot of spies here under diplomatic cover from a lot of countries, except Mikhail Kalugin may have been the only one who was first identified as a spy in a little thing called the Christopher Steele dossier, the dossier with Trump and the Moscow prostitutes and the bathroom stuff and all that. A leading Russian diplomat, Mikhail Kulagin, Steele wrote in the dossier, spelling the man's name wrong, had been withdrawn from Washington at short notice because Moscow feared his heavy involvement in the U.S. presidential election operation would be exposed in the media there. In other words, it appears the investigation James Comey of the FBI confirmed at the House hearing 2 weeks ago has not only nailed Kalugin as Russia's key man in Washington working on the last American election, but in so doing, it confirmed yet another critical detail in the Steele dossier. And if that story by itself didn't cause Trump or somebody close to him to fly into full-scale existential panic, something else Wood of the BBC reported must have. The U.S. government identified Kalugin as a spy while he was still at the embassy. A retired member of a U.S. intelligence agency told me that Kalugin was being kept under surveillance before he left the U.S. Surveillance of the Russian operative in Washington trying to help Trump win the election? Dates of meetings, transcripts of conversations, maybe recordings last August and earlier? Oops. Who else could be on those transcripts or recordings? And then there's what Wood of the BBC and several other less mainstream news sites report that American intelligence has finally figured out about what the Russians were actually trying to do to help Trump win. Remember the mysterious news last August that hackers had accessed the computers containing the voter registration records in Arizona and Illinois? And then an ABC report that this was tried in at least 20 different states? And then the Director of National Intelligence said there had been probing and scanning of registration rolls, quote, in most cases originated from servers operated by a Russian company. And we were all left wondering, why just scan the voter polls just to prove you could hack the computers? A test run for something? No. It seems the voter rolls were the goal, copying them. The Russians probing and scanning and copying the names of American voters. The names, the email addresses, the party affiliations of voters, each of whom could then be sent by email or on Facebook or in a tweet, only the stories most likely to keep them from voting for Hillary Clinton. Stories based on materials the Russians had already hacked from the Democratic National Committee, stories based on materials hacked from the emails of John Podesta, stories not based on anything. Micro-targeting, it is called. But this would be micro-targeting with the best, most specific list of registered voters that a political campaign could ever get. The actual official government list of registered voters. The kind of stuff that would be gold to a political data mining company like, say, Cambridge Analytica, whose former vice president of the board is, or was, Steve Bannon. Cambridge Analytica, up to $5 million of the equity of which is or was owned by Steve Bannon. Cambridge Analytica, which has its headquarters in New York City, 8 blocks down the street from Trump Tower. Moscow's man in Washington in charge of trying to help Trump win, wiretapped, to borrow somebody's favorite phrase, along with whoever the man happened to talk to. Evidence that the Russians may have hacked the names and online identities of voters in 20 key states and did so to steal the data that companies like the one Steve Bannon was vice president of would kill for. Oh, Donald, this is bad. I'd panic too. Resist. Peace.